So the new DMG has crafting in it. Some people like it, some people hate it, and I think it's fascinating. Fascinating as a case study in the most busted ass stuff you could possibly do in Dungeons & Dragons, but also as a piece of game design. So to craft a magic item, you have to have proficiency in the Arcana skill. You also have to have proficiency with a tool, and the type of tool you need is related to the type of magic item you're trying to craft, as shown in this handy table. As you can see, Woodcarver's proficiency is probably optimal. This is why Jesus was OP. You then need to spend time and gold to make the thing you want. The time taken is given in days, and 1 day equates to 8 hours work. So you could do 2 days worth of work in one 16-hour shift. People can also help you craft, and if they do, you divide the time it takes to craft an item by the number of helpers. But every helper needs to have the Arcana proficiency and the correct tool proficiency as well. So if you wanted a broom of flying, for example, you could grab a friend and it would take you 40 hours work each and 200 gold to make one. In a real grind, 2 elves can pull that off in 48 hours, thanks to their 4-hour long rests. Consumable items like potions take half as long to craft and cost half as much, and if a magic item casts a spell, like the Wand of Magic Missiles, you need to be able to cast that spell to craft that item. Finally, you need some raw materials, which is up to your GM, but everything's up to your GM, so that's kind of a moot point. The DMG does, however, give a guide that in any given city, there is a 75% chance that the materials you need are there. If they aren't, you can try crafting something else that week, or travel to another city and check there, or just wait 7 days. After a week, you can repeat that 75% check. And that's it. That's everything you need to craft. And if that sounds suspiciously easy, it's because it is. There's a lot to talk about, but let's start with the insane, game-breaking power in your hands right now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the patented D&D Shorts Top 10 insanely busted combos you can do with crafting. For the purpose of this, let's imagine we're Wizards of the Coast approved customers, and we're following the PHB exactly. At level 5, a player has on average 637 gold, plus a common and an uncommon item. So let's talk about the possibilities. We've already mentioned the Broom of Flying, but actually think about this. Every player can drop 200 gold and boom, everyone has a 50-foot fly speed. Some of you might remember the original Aarakocra and how for years people argued that it was the most busted species in the game. It was constantly banned from tables. That's because it had a 50-foot fly speed. Now anyone can have that, and they can do it in heavy armor. By the way, I am showing the old version of these magic items, but they're basically the same. The Broom of Flying takes a magic action to activate now, but it lasts all day. That fly speed is always on. But what if 50-foot fly speed isn't enough, and you want to cosplay the full-on classic witch? Well, you just toss on a cloak of protection. Thanks for the +1 AC and +1 to every saving throw for every member in the party. But that's all a bit defensive. What if you want to make people explode? Well, 200 gold can grab any spellcaster a +1 spellcasting focus. Each class has their own specific type, and they are all insane. The uncommon Rod of the Pact Keeper gives a warlock +1 to all spell attack rolls and all spell save DCs, and once per long rest, you can just regain a spell slot for free. The uncommon Bloodwell Vial gives a sorcerer a +1 to the DC of every spell, #fireball, and every spell attack roll, #firebolt. It also says, once per long rest, when you roll hit dice, you regain 5 sorcery points. The new durable feat lets you do that as a bonus action. 5 additional sorcery points as a bonus action every day, while also buffing every spell you cast. Whoa, dude, what the hell is that? Oh, what? This is my brand new watch from Holzkern. Holzkern make beautiful watches and jewelry from natural materials like wood, stone, and even leaves. They're also from Austria, like Steve Irwin. Crikey, mate! No, dude, Austria is Mozart and Arnie. Also, I was talking about that. Oh, you mean this guy. This little guy, my bracelet. Yeah, I picked some extras up as gifts for the holidays. Holzkern have beautiful things for both men and women, and because it's all made from natural materials, every item is unique. Plus, for a limited time only, Holzkern are doing a 30% discount, the biggest sale of the year, with worldwide express shipping. Okay, yes, that's amazing, but I was talking about the monster directly behind you. Oh, that's Jeff. He's the guy who told me about Holzkern. Haha, well said, Jeff. Get yours by clicking the link below. But it's not only spellcasters who can get in on the fun. Maybe an Eldritch Claw tattoo is what you'd like to craft. This tattoo adds +1 to every attack and damage roll of your unarmed strikes, and as a bonus action, you can empower yourself to gain further benefits. It lasts for 1 minute, the reach of your unarmed strikes increases by 15 feet, and every hit deals an extra 1d6 force damage. Did someone say level 5 monk hitting for an extra 4d6 + 4 every turn while staying out of melee range with melee attacks? Because that's what I heard. And that's before we get to the other tattoos. Spell-wrought tattoos are consumable magic items that let anyone cast a stored spell. You can craft an uncommon one that will let any creature cast a spell of up to 3rd level for only 100 gold pieces. You can store encounter-breaking spells like Hypnotic Pattern or just good old Fireball and then give that to your familiar. That's an additional spell in combat that you don't have to use a spell slot or an action to cast, and you can do this multiple times. Hell, you can craft spell-wrought tattoos containing the spell Find Familiar and give them to the entire party, so everyone gets a familiar who can then cast spells. Give each of those familiars a spell-wrought tattoo with Fireball, and you can toss out 4 fireballs the moment combat starts. Round 1, 32d6 damage. Yes, it costs 400 gold to do, but yes, it's worth it to see a mouse stand on its hind legs and commit terrorism. And familiars can do other stuff too. What about the Wand of Magic Missiles? Anyone can learn Magic Missile through the Magic Initiate Origin feat, so anybody can craft these wands. Then you give it to the Warlock's Imp Familiar and let them blast away in combat. Sure, the new rules say you can only expend 3 charges at a time, but that is still 5d4 + 5 unavoidable damage every turn in combat. This essentially turns your familiars into roaming machine guns. Or if you're looking for a more controlling option, why not grab the Ever-Smoking Bottle, which can plunge an entire encounter into heavy obscurement. This lets any prepared party who've taken the Skulker feat or have blind fighting or tremor sense to completely body any encounter that doesn't specifically have blind sight. Yes, this uncommon item even blocks true sight. And we still haven't mentioned Enspelled weapons. You can infuse a spell from the Conjuration, Divination, Evocation, Necromancy, or Transmutation school into a weapon for your allies. Crafting an Enspelled weapon with a cantrip or a 1st level spell counts as only an uncommon craft. And when you do this, unlike with tattoos which are single use, that weapon gets 6 charges and regains 1d6 charges each dawn. You can cast the spell within by just expending 1 charge. The exact same applies to Enspelled Armor, except armor can store spells from the Illusion and Abjuration schools. Every fighter, ranger, and paladin now gets the shield spell for free multiple times per day. I mean, what is the worst that could happen when a Warforged fighter with heavy armor and a shield, and the defensive fighting style, and a cloak of protection, and Enspelled Armor can rock an on-demand 28 AC from level 5. They can be trusted with that, right? And finally, what if you just want to completely break the core fundamental balance of the game? You know, stats? Those things you need to play, strength, dexterity, well, what if they didn't matter? What if you dropped all your stats into charisma and constitution as a paladin, kind of forgetting that you need strength to hit hard? Well, don't worry about it. Just drop 200 gold on the Gauntlets of Ogre Power and set your strength score to 19. Every player can start the game with 100 gold now, so if just one other player is willing to loan you their startup, you can do this at level 1. That works out as an approximate plus 11 to your strength score across the entire game for just 200 gold. I don't need to tell you how crazy it is to be able to completely dump a stat, invest all those ability score points elsewhere, and then come in with 19 strength anyway. And let's be clear, these are just some basic ideas. We could go on for hours here. We haven't even talked about potions, or spell scrolls, or items that are rare and above. All of those combos use uncommon items or lower. Also remember that these aren't mutually exclusive. They're not a big investment. It's not like a powerful combo that requires multiple feats and a specific subclass that really limits your playstyle. Players can do 3 or 4 of these things by just level 5, no matter their species or ability scores or even their class. And yes, that is all very funny, but let's be serious for a second and talk about game design. Because, to put it plainly, these rules aren't good. Yes, they're overpowered, but mechanics-wise, they're bad for 3 reasons. Number 1 is the most important. When you design anything for a game, the first question you need to ask is what type of behavior does this mechanic encourage? Theoretically, everything you create should inspire a desired behavior in players and GMs. My philosophy in design is to encourage collaboration, engagement, and fun at the game table. But what do these crafting rules inspire? Well, to be honest, they inspire players to not play D&D. What is the optimal strategy when you have 200 gold? The answer is to stay at home and build something. There are no checks, there is no adventuring, there's no contest, you just stop playing the game and get a magic item a few days later. Players used to be encouraged to explore, they were hungry to crawl dungeons for magic items, but now you guarantee them by staying at home. And if you can guarantee a magic item by crafting it, I mean, why not just let people buy it at that point? What's the difference between buying a magic item for 200 gold and crafting one for 200 gold and getting it a couple of days later? Sure, it might take 5 days downtime, but people just fast forward through that anyway. Sure, a GM can make up reasons why players can't take time off, they can put a ticking clock on the adventure, but should a GM have to do that across an entire campaign? Never allow for a second there to be a moment that players can take 5 days off, because if they do, the game will break? No. GMs shouldn't have to fight the mechanics of the game to get players out of the door. Players should be inspired by the mechanics to go out hunting and adventuring. The second problem is simply, yes, the availability and low cost of magic items is simply too powerful. Sure, GMs who are worried about PCs being too strong could just ban every single broken magic item, but that's not reasonable. There are thousands of magic items across this game, and you can find ways to break most of them. You can't just ban all the problematic ones, and you shouldn't have to. It isn't reasonable to charge someone for a book, especially if they're a new GM who is the target audience here, and then say, when they find the rules to be insanely broken, well, it's on you to ban a bunch of stuff that you've never even heard of before. It sounds obvious, but if you're buying a book with a mechanic in it, that mechanic should be balanced. This isn't. Now, as you know, I love being the GM for players with crazy, overpowered builds. I've always found that if you match the energy your players bring to the table, you will have an amazing time no matter the type of player you have. However, even I have to concede that these rules are just bad for the game. Not because they're necessarily too strong, but because they are homogenizing. With the new crafting rules in place, there is no reason that any player shouldn't have a broom of flying. 200 gold for 50-foot fly speed forever. It's insane, and that means that every flying species is kind of pointless now. Why play them when you can fly anyway? So are a bunch of subclass features. Genie Warlock, Sea Druid, Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, Ascendant Dragon Monk, all of these guys get a fly speed as a core feature, but now that feature just doesn't exist, because everyone can fly anyway. There's also no reason that pretty much every build shouldn't have Enspelled Armor with the Shield spell in it. Access to the Shield spell used to be one of the biggest draws to being an Eldritch Knight fighter, or grabbing it via Magic Initiate as a paladin. But now, why do those things when you can have it anyway? Rogues who could pick up the Booming Blade cantrip were really good before. It was a whole reason to play a half-elf or a kobold, or grab it via Magic Initiate. But now every rogue can cast those spells with an Enspelled weapon. And it goes the other way too. With the power of Enspelled weapons, why would you ever play a Soul Knife rogue? That's an amazing subclass, but it requires you to use your Psychic Blades. And awesome as those are, they're not as good as one dagger that can cast shield and another dagger that can cast Booming Blade. Same with Cloak of Protection. Bumping every saving throw and your AC by 1 is way better than any feat could ever hope to accomplish, and everyone can do this for just 200 gold. What I really love is being amazed and impressed by my players' creativity and watching them have fun with wacky builds. But if you use these crafting rules as written, every build is going to end up looking pretty much the same unless you're purposefully making yourself bad. These types of rules are what playtesting is for. It's meant to catch this type of stuff, but they were never playtested. I don't know why. I know the designers at Wizards of the Coast are better than this. I don't know why these rules were printed as they are. The real problem when you dig into it is tying magic item rarity to its crafting time and price. It simply doesn't work. It will never work because magic items aren't balanced around rarity. Cloak of Protection and Ring of Protection are functionally identical, but one is uncommon and one is rare. Why? I have no idea. There's too many busted low-level magic items, and too many garbage high-level magic items for that to be your measure of power. Unless you redesigned every magic item in the game, which they're not allowed to do because it has to be backwards compatible, this system could never work. So am I one of the people who hates the new crafting rules? Actually, no, not at all. I don't mind, because there are free crafting rules out there that are so much better that anyone can use. My favorite are these ones by Loot Tavern. They have rules for harvesting materials from defeated enemies and working those materials into usable magic items. There are actual skill checks involved for you to build your entire character around if you want to optimize them. And most importantly, it encourages players to get out there in the world, hunt down a dragon, defeat it, and craft armor from its scales. It's a gameplay loop as old as time, and it's awesome. And it's free. This isn't sponsored. I'm sure there are other great crafting systems out there too, but you may as well just take this one because it's free. The new crafting rules are bad. They don't encourage exploration, and you can do completely busted things with them from as early as levels 1 to 5. My recommendation is, if you want a balanced game, don't use these rules. Use one of the other free crafting systems out there instead. But if you want awesome new rules, subclasses, species, feats, and spells, you can grab them for free on my Patreon. You can also subscribe there to support the channel and get more awesome stuff every month. Your support makes this entire channel possible in the swampy, unpredictable marshes that is YouTube ad revenue. And yeah, that's all I got. I'll see you next time.